This is another talk, the third talk, entitled Meditation is Action. Meditation is action. Very subtle action. We're used to thinking, assuming that action is of the form like this. What else can I knock around here? Being silly, of course, but we tend to grasp onto gross kind of action as something that substantiates our preconceptions, our ideas, our judgments, our hopes, our fears, on and on, because other people can see us doing it. People can't see when you sit down, hold still, everyone is holding fairly still, but everything under the sun literally is going on in your mind. Very subtle. So what you're doing is, instead of acting out in some kind of and I'm talking about this as a topic, this is the third one, I'm talking about because of the intense propaganda against sitting meditation. Get up off your cushion, go out into the world. Horse shit. Stay on the cushion. There's plenty of people, thousands, millions, probably billions, that are all doing something about something. Something happens, they do something. Something else happens, they do something to that. They run away from it, they run to it, on and on. And you can tell it irritates me. It does irritate me. I don't mind being irritated. So meditation is an extremely powerful and subtle form of doing something. You're not doing much. What are you doing? You're actually looking at something, observing something, seeing something. Your awareness may move from this movement to that. It may move from this part of a concept arising away from that. It may move towards that. That is actually witnessed. You're actually looking at the very intricate machinery, to use that metaphor, of consciousness, the way consciousness works. Most people are just take consciousness for granted and move on out into the world, and it's called materialism. Not wrong with materialism. We need tables and chairs. We need meditation cushions, and so on and so forth. So I'm not taking exception to any of that. But I feel that after watching this for months, years actually, about people, and there's something called engaged Buddhism. And I'm not saying there aren't people operating under that definition that aren't doing something that's helpful. Of course they are. They're doing something, they're looking at things, and they're trying to interact with others to be helpful and supportive. But one of the things that they may be doing that is not so helpful is to come around, turn around and look back at you on your cushion and evaluate you. So you should be doing, when someone does that, when someone thinks you should be doing what they're doing, they don't understand what they're doing. And they want support. They don't understand, they're not really sure of what they're doing, and they want to get other people to do it. It's all over the place in terms of spiritual path. And Buddhism is no exception. People think that some forms of Buddhism are right and some are wrong and some are helpful and some are not so helpful. It's very irritating that all these people who are spending so much time on the cushion don't have a clearer view of what this is. They're not more clear about it. And why do you think that is? Because they don't sit enough. Probably that has something to do with it. And you need to sit, whatever your karma is, whatever your level of realization is from the time you're 3 minutes old, because it starts then. Whatever karma you're bringing into this world from who knows where, past lives, call it whatever you want to, call it future lives. We might suddenly discover that the future is actually back there. So if the idea is to fundamentally help ourselves and help others, be kind, be safe, be creative, enjoy our lives, insofar as we can through these nerve endings that sometimes get abraded by circumstances, objects, other consciousnesses. So I think it's good possibly to use those two ideas, the gross form of activity and the very subtle form of activity. If you're sitting very, very still and you're watching someone get credit for something that you think you should have gotten credit for, there's a whole lot of activity going on. What do they call that? Jealousy? Is that? Yeah, jealousy. Is that with a G? No, it's with a J. Jealousy. I'm very jealous of what you have, of what you do, of what you get a credit for. How do we do that? It's very subtle, but it's still a kind of activity, and it's ignored if it's covered up by a lot of gross activity. I'm not saying that you can't jog or that you can't do yoga or you can't do all these other things, but spend some time. If you're listening to me, then you could listen to me. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Spend some time, sit down, hold still, don't do anything, but just watch what continues to do something, which will be your mind, your thought patterns, your ideas, your memory, your evaluations, your elaborations, it's on and on. And you can't see that very clear if you're doing any kind of movement at all, even this much movement. Shields your awareness from all of the subtleties that are rising there all the time. So I'm encouraging you, I'm lobbying for, I guess, sit down. That's why we have this building, which is dedicated to doing this. We have scheduled meditation that I've talked about probably in every third talk, if not every talk. Sit down, hold still. Just observe what happens. And that way you actually introduce yourself to the nature of your own mind. And you begin to see for yourself that it is not separate from anything. It's not separate from the terror in Syria. It's not separate from the terrors in the Gulag in the 1930s. It's not separate, not separate. It's also not one with. That's going too far. Then we're back to a conceptual smushing together of things that ego just loves to say we're all one. Misunderstanding. It's actually not two. The two-ness shows up, and then we make a comment on that conceptually that is fairly accurate. All the two-ness, the 10,000 things, as they say in Buddhism, is confusing. This doesn't mean that if we do this, that we won't at some point get up and enraged and go out into the street and do something totally different. But it needs to come out of awareness. You don't need what is that called, an interloper? Didn't we get that straight the other day? An interloper is somebody that interferes. An interlocutor is someone who helps communicate. The interloper is your unexamined mind based on hope and fear and paranoia. Examine it so that you don't operate out of that confusion, out of that propaganda about what's going to happen. We need to do this. We need to do that. What if he gets away with this? What if this happens? I'm saying don't take your eyes off from that. If you listen to many of my talks, you'll hear me say over and over again, watch the news. Watch all of it. Not just your favorite news, but watch other ones. Watch what's going on. Because it's getting quite threatening from the point of human beings continuing to live. Yes, sir.
How can we watch the news for prolonged periods of time, or maybe just consistently, and we're affected by that?
Watch it for an hour. You don't have to watch it.
But even the exposure
yes.
of those issues.
What are you doing with it now?
Well, I noticed that by exposing myself more, I actually find myself buying into it more because it's always always
but
there.
It's the observing of the buying in that is important. Other people are actually buying in. You're seeing that you're buying in. Big difference. The people who are buying don't know they're doing that. They actually believe it. You see that you're buying in, but it's suspect. You're not, because or you wouldn't be able to tell me this. You wouldn't be able to come in and say, seems like I'm buying into that. Go ahead.
How do you not, and the other thing that occurs is, how do you not become desensitized to the terrible things that are happening? The first time you see a police officer shoot an innocent person, it's nauseating, and then you see it 20 times, and it's like, oh, another one got shot, and someone else got shot.
Yeah.
Not just kind of shut down.
Well, as a person who is training their mind and trying to prioritize or lead their life with their awareness, this is how it feels to be trained. Just do it anyway. I understand. I watch the news a lot. So there's no way to not, that's the downside of doing that, is that we feel like, that's why quite often people say, oh, I can't watch the news. I've had students of mine to come and say, well, I never watch the news, it's just too depressing. Not a good idea. That's the kind of ignorance that probably was happening in the 1930s. I can't really watch that. No, watch it, so that when the Reichstag fire happens here, which it probably will, the way it's looking, if it hasn't already, and somebody uses that as some kind of a justification to institute martial law, that you see it beforehand. And what you would do about it, I don't know. I'm not going to create an organization called Antifa. The anti-fascist thing is it's just more war. It's actually war against war. It's war and war and war and war more. Don't go to war with war. Also, don't look away from it. Don't join it. Don't run away from it. Don't justify it. Don't do anything with it, but keep your eye on it. Just like you keep your eye on the thoughts that are moving. If you have negative thoughts and you try to shut them down, you're actually training yourself to do that in the world. Don't do anything with it. It's fundamentally open up and accommodate everything that comes. But don't miss what it is, see the contrast between negativity, positivity, and yes.
The other thing that I notice is that it seems that the news becomes a type of entertainment. Like if you look at Facebook, it's just a bunch of people's ideas, and then there's people paying to tell you what to think and advertising. How much should we even look at that? Well,
look what you're asking me. And so, and now you asked me, now I'm telling you, do it a little bit. Do it some. Don't flood yourself with it so that you have a heavy reaction that shuts it all off. And also don't just immediately jump to a conclusion about I can't do that anymore. Stories we tell ourselves, watch those stories because they're protecting the self-centeredness.
What is true in the midst of all of these opinions and perspectives of what's occurring in the world?
The only thing that's true is the space in which they occur. Everything else is a lie. Relative truth. Samvriti Satya has been studying this since ancient times. Relative truth is going to be apparently true or temporarily true, but it always changes into something else. It's just like, go ahead, please.
What is the action part of meditation?
You're holding still, and the activity is happening in your mind stream. That's where the activity is happening, and you're observing it. So by observing it, you're also not separating yourself from it. So by not separating yourself from it, you're actually in that action. You are those thoughts. You are that. Unless you object to it, unless you say, I don't want to think that, or I can't stand that, or this is too painful, or which are all valid things to say if you feel that way. But that's why we practice. We practice training ourselves so that we can find out who this is, make friends with this, so that friendship that has happened here starts to extend out to others. It's called bodhicitta. It's also called compassion. But we have to start somewhere. We start with our own negativity rather than take the unexamined negativity, as I've said before, out into the world and hammer on other people And we're actually hammering on our own negativity that we projected onto others. This is so subtle. Something happens, and because of the negativity there's a resonance. Like the example I use is the drum. You hit the drum, and if one of the windows is lined up just right, that'll start to vibrate. Very similar with aggression. If there's aggression somewhere, and we go towards the aggression to try to quell that or stop that or back that off, if we have aggression here we've not examined closely, we've been shutting down on it, it starts to resonate with us, then we double up on that aggression and then try to stop the aggression that actually is I'm laughing because it's obvious if you see it, and if you don't see it, it's completely blinding. Go ahead.
If there was something that you were passionate about getting involved in, is there a way, would you recommend anything as far as sitting beforehand, before you get involved in anything, it's a good idea to sit for a while?
Yeah, what's a good idea is to sit every day. Sit as much as you can until you don't. As my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, once said, well, if you get cleared, you have to continue to sit. And he said, no. And I feel that's true. You may sit, you may not. But until you're clear about what this is, until you're so clear that you're tongue-tied. You see the no separation so completely and thoroughly everywhere that it is obvious that people are confused and are fighting each other and destroying each other, which is themselves. So first I would say train your mind to see clearly what is true. That's the way of saying it. And then if you feel like you want to go in a particular direction, just don't do anything unless you have to. And if you're not looking at it, then you may do it based on preconceptions. But if you're really looking at that, then you can move towards that and see, like every time something comes up where some Democrat wants you to fund them, it's because they're against the Republicans, or it's very fishy. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. If you were to come and say, I just sent $100 to the Republican or the Democratic Party or to some movement or something, I wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't say don't do that. I would say don't do anything unless you have to. And then I would trust you to do whatever you need to do. You're listening to me. You're a student of mine. So I don't know. I'm not going to get in the way of your insight, your prajna, your wisdom mind. I don't know how that's going to work for you. All I know is don't take anything for granted, even my words. Yes, sir.
Use the concept of training, which suggests a counterpart of like a practice. What would be the practice after the training?
Training, life. Eventually, what is understood here starts to get up off the cushion and go with you. You start to, if I use a real obvious way, you're sitting, negative thoughts come, you watch. Positive thoughts come, daydreams come, you watch. Body feelings come and go, and you watch. You observe. Memories of the past, things you shouldn't have done, things you maybe feel guilty about, just observe. Don't add to the guilt, and don't try to get out of it. Don't do anything with it. Just observe. And as you observe, you'll notice that nothing lasts. So even your observation, every time that comes up, it will go into that texture and see more clearly what that is. And eventually you will discover there is no solid self anywhere. There's no self in the skandhas. Form, feeling, perception, concept or words, and consciousness is the sixth sense feels in their object. There's no solid being there. It just is an incredible illusion. It just looks like I'm here. It looks like you're there, but it's not true. So the practice would be practice here, practice as much as you can. When you get up off the cushion, then that awareness will show up in your life. You will have more space around the words you say. You'll hear what you're saying even before you say it. You may start to say less. You may start to listen more than likely. And as you listen, you may understand less. This is actually understanding. It's understanding less, because it's not the linear kind of logical understanding that ego usurps for its own use. Me, and my stuff, my ideas, my opinions, well, I think this about that. What do you think about that? Well, I don't think that. Well, why don't you? Because it seems to me that this and this and this and that. It's just a circular, and it gives the illusion of a straight line, but it is a circle. Just like going to bed, and getting up, going to bed. It's circular. It's a cycle. Everything's in cycles. The only thing that doesn't go in a cycle is wisdom. Wisdom doesn't do anything.
A question from Shane out in California. He asks, how do I not interfere with what arises? It seems like awareness of something changes what you do with it.
What's the question?
What do I do with what arises?
Don't do anything.
Wait, let's see. Let me make sure. How do I not interfere with what arises?
Notice, it takes a lot of energy to do this, and so it'll slow you down. But notice the way you're interfering. Notice the mechanics of the interfering. So how do you not interfere? You don't not interfere by putting up roadblocks. That's a different kind of operation. You might have to continue to interfere so you can actually see all of the gaps and all of the machinery and the interstices that are happening within that kind of interfering, so that you can understand where it's getting its fuel from. So you can understand, how does this particular situation arise in me, called meddling with others? To actually see the way in which you're meddling.
How does it look when you don't do anything unless you have to?
Scary. It could be just like, I feel like I should do something, but I know that's coming out of some kind of motivation that I don't really trust. Coming out of hope and fear. Hope that things will be better. Hope it's used all over the place. Well, what gives you hope? Well, this is a misunderstanding. You're actually derailing the very intelligence, the very wisdom, the very consciousness that needs to just hold its seat and watch. Having hope this is how having hope looks. I'm in a daydream about how much I hope everything's going to get better. What gives me hope? Well, that gives me kind of hope there, but what else gives you hope? Well, some of that over there, let's see. Yeah, that gives me hope. And sure, I'm mocking the whole thing, but I'm saying, be real careful when you use that. Next time you use the word hope, don't stop using it. I'm not talking about not saying that. But be aware of what's the mechanism, what's your emotional, mental, spiritual mechanism behind hope. This doesn't mean that we don't wish all beings be happy and at their ease. Of course we do. Yes.
Why should we care? I don't know how to word this. Why should we care about what is going on in the world? Or
That's pretty good. You want me to address that? You got another one?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Why should we care when we know that our awareness that we cannot help everything? We can only.
So you're operating out of an assumption or a belief or an unexamined assumption, preconception, that everything is separate. You think that everything is separate. And some people are good, some people are bad, some people are blamed, some people get credit. If I may say so, I'm not trying to take your inventory or tell you what's going on with you, but that if you're asking that question, that's probably what is bringing that up. There's only this. There isn't anything else but this. Right. Don't say right. Don't agree too quick. Don't agree just to appease me. Don't chew your lower lip. No, you could do that. It's your lip. As they say, gnaw away. No, they don't say that. I said that. Yes. Yes. You.
What is the fear that we're not doing enough?
That's a self-centeredness. And it's very good because that I can segue, or how does that pronounce? Segui? Segui. So I can segui into what? I can segue into, what was your question? What is the fear that we're not doing enough? Okay, so thank you. This is the part that shows us that if you look at it, that it's not so much about actually doing something, it's how we look as someone who's doing something. We're concerned about how we appear, not just to others, but to ourselves. So we start looking for ways, like if I showed you a way that would make you feel like every time you did something, you got all kinds of feedback about how wonderful you are, how much you're doing, and how great you are, and we're so grateful to you, and we don't know what we would do without you. That's how we keep you here, by the way. So then you would be, then that would help. You would think, oh, I'm doing something because other people think I'm doing good. But when it comes to this kind of thing, you have to validate yourself. You have to, if there's any validation going on, it has to, it's in some way eventually, either now or 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years from now, you have to understand that nothing is separate. If you do, then the kind of confidence that you get comes out of, doesn't come out of relative situation. It comes out of wisdom. And wisdom only sees wisdom. It doesn't see other stuff. Yes, go ahead.
How can I get to the cushion or hold my seat when I feel swamped by this fear that I'm not doing enough?
Schedule, which you're already doing. And it's difficult here because we're trying to survive financially, which is difficult for us. So we have to, people that are, I would prefer that everyone are in here sitting 6.5 hours a day. That's why we have that schedule. But people have to get up off the cushion and go and make money so that we can, as they say, keep the lights on. I'd much rather have you in here sitting than out working on different projects and so on. But the feeling that you're not doing enough, the way to really, you're functioning as a student of mine, and come and ask me if you're doing enough. What you're doing is you're helping this community, you're helping these other people who come for a retreat, or for, as some people are coming at different times to take 10 days out of their life and go upstairs and sit there and look at the wall for 8 hours a day for a couple weeks. And so you're actually helping that person do that. And then other people will take up the slack when you go to do your extended personal practices. And then the other thing I say is don't take your eyes off from everything that's happening around you. And because you're a meditator, when you look at that, you're looking at it a little bit differently than people who are jumping to conclusions and having conversations that are just watch two people on CNN. It's just, even extremely intelligent, brilliant people talking out of their, I won't say where, but they're talking as if there is an enemy, as if there is a right and a wrong, and there is not a right. This is a made up stuff. I'm not saying there isn't someone killing somebody else, but you have to see the causes and conditions that led up to that, and not just say he did that to him or to her, and then blame them. And it's because 2 lifetimes ago that person killed that person. Yes.
So if you're watching how you react, if you should react, if you're watching, very aware, is there a true answer to a need? Is there such a thing as an answer, a response to a need?
There could be, but it needs to come out of your awareness rather than somebody validating what you're doing or saying. It needs to, if you have doubts about something, don't do anything. You don't have enough information yet. You don't have enough, there's not enough clarity around something. If you start acting out of the ego, will want you to get it in gear so it can stop looking at the subtle actions. Ego doesn't want to look at the subtle actions because it sees how helpless it is there. Go ahead.
What's the warning sign? What's the...
Yeah. Fear. If you can see it. Sometimes fear manifests as anger. Sometimes fear manifests as grasping or judging or blaming. As soon as we start blaming, how do I know about it? I do it. That's how I know. I watch myself do it. But I don't do anything with it. I just am aware that I'm going into a blaming mode based on everything else that's happening. You don't have to stop anything. You don't have to change anything. Just be aware of it. And if the awareness is really, really powerful, then you will act, say it this way, you'll act appropriately in whatever situation it may be. There's no way, if that's true, there's no way anybody can ever, I'm not saying somebody couldn't sneak up on you and put you in a box somewhere and lock you up the rest of your life, but even that, the kind of freedom we're talking about here, you can't interfere with someone's basic freedom. You can lock up their body, but you can't lock up their spirit. Yes?
That was more of my question. Why should we care about that kind of stuff if we are aware that
It's not bad. It's a good place to lose it. Oh, no, please don't apologize. No, please. Yes.
Another question from Shane.
Yes.
You mentioned gaps and machinery. He wants to know what you mean by that.
I don't know what the context was.
You talked about, I think, the complex machinery of our minds.
We, through watching, through observing the way the mind works, which is if you hold the body very, very still for whatever period you can. Some people can sit down and hold still for an hour. Their body construct, their mind, everything there allows them to do that without a lot of difficulty. Someone else can't sit still more than 7 or 8 minutes. But the stillness is what's important, not the length of time. Sit very still and watch what moves. If you're holding very still, you'll notice your diaphragm. You might even notice your heartbeat. You'll notice all kinds of physiological things. And then you'll actually notice over time, you'll begin to notice the way the mind always is doing something. There's always activity in the mind. And this is the kind of activity and you begin to see that the activity in the mind is actually being observed by something. And then you say, well, what is that being observed by? So who is the witness or the observer? That will show up in your own, are you okay? Oh, you have the keys? So she's going into a prison, needs the keys to the car. She's not getting locked up. She's going there to teach meditation. It's good to know. I just thought I should just clarify that for people. What was the question?
You were talking about the activity of the mind is being observed.
Yes, and so I'm using to address Shane's question. I'm just saying that you see that there are times when there's gaps, and then there's times when things, all the gears and cogs and everything start to operate again, and we're off. And the next thing you know, you're building you're off in the woods somewhere building a cabin or something, and then that comes to a close, and then you're looking at your lawnmower that won't start, and you're kind of going through the how that system, the fuel system, and you're just rehearsing little things that happen, bringing something that's happened the other day down into the meditation environment that you're in, and that's all needs to just be observed. It's not about stopping that. There's some teachings which I practiced for many years are about labeling thinking, return to the breath, about breath awareness, which is the idea of trying to stabilize a meditator, to build a meditator. Don't teach that, though I did for a long, long time, practiced it. But the way it looks here now is you don't have to do anything except hold the body still, have all the senses open, watch what continues to move. And then you will be exactly in the space that you need to be to train your mind with your particular karma. You're not covering anything up, wasting time being a good meditator, trying to live up to something or get a credential for I sat still for an hour, or I never moved, or I didn't hardly have a thought. Ha, ha, ha.
What's the distinction between the gap that you were talking about with Shane's question and the space?
It's just a gap. It's just you kind of look back. It's like you realize that nothing's been happening for a moment or a few moments. You just notice that there's space around things, and space is not something. So it looks like, so it shows up as the distance between two things. So that's how it shows up. And then if you go long enough, then it eventually shows up as the very thing you're looking at is space. Yes.
You said your teacher taught make friends with yourself at a
Yes.
very deep level, and then every day we practice. We do the practice of Maitri Bhavana, and there's several lines in there, but one in particular talks about boundless goodwill and unlimited friendliness.
Yes.
How do we cultivate unlimited friendliness?
So I think that we're using that as a concept. We're using concepts all the time. So that's what mantras are about. That's what Maitri Bhavana is about. That's what sutras are about. There's repetition. Take a good idea conceptually and then repeat it so that your mind gets flooded with this concept. So that if anything is going to show up in your mind, it's going to be, may all beings enjoy happiness, the root of happiness. May they be free from suffering, the root of suffering. May they not be separate from the great happiness, devoid of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity that is free from. Yeah. So that's always there. When you say it enough, that's always there. It's always there as a support, as a conceptual construct, so that you can move into that. If you like the one that I didn't make it up, but one that I've taught or promoted is you could actually do it like this: may all beings be happy and at their ease. You could say, thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. Thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. Thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. Thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. And you could do that fast or slow, and you could contemplate each word, and you could think, of course, I have all kinds of complaints, but I know that those complaints are I'm just being kind of whiny about my life or about whatever, or I'm getting a raw deal, or my next door neighbor got a new car and I'm still driving a clunker. So all kinds of things. They're simple, and we just bring it all to the cushion, bring everything to the cushion. Thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. It's just a way of bringing that kind of, changing our attitude about everything, because ultimately it's our wisdom mind, our Buddha nature already wants the good. And basic goodness is really all there is. Everything else is invented around it. We need to do something else. But it's not something I said, right? Okay, now we're going to close and we'll do daily Dharma gathering, and you can announce something about that.
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit that's in the back of your blue stand books. And we'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes that we have in the hallway. And we are also accepting online payment. Every little bit helps.
Say something about daily Dharma gathering, please.
And for anyone who wants to stay for the daily Dharma gathering that starts in 10 minutes, the subscription series, you're welcome to do that.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o san shi shi hu shi son hu sa mu ku sa mo ko ja hu ro mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.